Hey there guys, welcome to the notes video for lesson 3.4, graphing inequalities. Now graphing linear inequalities is exactly like graphing linear equations, the equations that were in the form y equals mx plus b. The only difference is that it has an equality symbol instead of equals to. So instead of seeing y equals mx plus b, we'll see y is less than mx plus b, y is greater than mx plus b, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, so on and so forth. Now, you'll graph it exactly the same way. You'll still plot your points, so you'll still find your y-intercept, and then you'll find your other points by using the slope. So you do that as normal. The only difference is that the inequality will tell you how to draw your line. We'll have two types, solid and dashed lines, and how to shade. Are we shading above or below? This chart we're about to fill out right now is really, really important because it's your reference chart for all graphs you're going to make for lesson 3.4. Now we'll begin. So our first part is this symbol, which is the less than symbol. So this is less than. Usually you know you have a less than type of inequality if you see an equation in the form of y less than mx plus b. So if you ever have an equation in this form, you're going to follow this. So I'm going to draw my graph, but before the graph, let me describe what's going to happen to my graph. Now, as far as shading goes, you are going to shade below. Less than means I'm going below, downwards. So, shade below. And since it's strictly less than, which means there's no bar, you're going to have a dashed line. So, we don't have a particular equation in this case, so I'm just going to draw a random line through my graph. Now a few things. First, it told me that I am going to have a dashed line. A dashed line will look like this. So instead of being a completely solid line, you're going to have a dashed line where there's little points. And since it's telling me I'm going to shade below, well, below the line I just drew is where I'm going to shade. So I'm going to take my highlighter, my pencil, anything you have, and you are going to shade below your line. So when we have inequality graphs that are in the form of y less than mx plus b, you draw a dashed line and you shade below. Now our next symbol is similar to less than, but it is greater than, where the mouth is open towards my y variable. So if I have an equation in the form y greater than mx plus b, same thing as before, I'm going to draw my general coordinate grid, and then I'm going to describe what's going to happen. This time, my shading, since it's greater than, I'm going to shade above. So I'm going to shade above my line. However, I'm still strictly greater than. There is still no bar. So I'm only going to draw a dashed line. So we can begin. Now my dashed line, I'm going to draw like this. So it's better, you can see, to look at, my dashed line by just drawing dashed lines rather than drawing a solid line and then little points on top of it. So always be careful when you're drawing dashed lines to make sure that it is easily identified to be a dashed line and not a solid line. Now like we said, this time we are shading above. So this time, I'm going to shade above my line. And so, I'll take my highlighter, pen, pencil, color pencil, anything you have, and this time, I am shading above. So, a few things. If it has no bar, so it's strictly less than and strictly greater than, then it will always be dashed line. However, if it's less than, well, it makes sense that less than means I'm going downwards, and it makes sense that greater than means I'm going upwards. And we keep going. Notice this one looks like this one. The only difference is now I have a bar. This is less than and equal to. And once again, we'll see it in the form of where the pointy end is pointing towards my y. Y is less than or equal to mx plus b. So let's describe what's going on. Now, as far as shading goes, Notice you're still less than, which means you're still going to shade below. However, now I do have the bars less than and equal to. So instead of drawing a dashed line, you're going to draw a solid line. So those are the lines you are used to drawing. So for example, this is a solid line. No spaces in between. Now I said I'm going to shade below my line. So everywhere below this line is this section of my coordinate grid. So that's where my line will look like. Finally, you have greater than or equal to. Hopefully you can read that. It just says greater than and equal to in the form of y, where it's open towards the y, mx plus b. I'll draw my graph. And this time it's greater than. So if it's greater than, it is going to be shade above. And if it is with the bar greater than or equal to, it is a solid line. So I'm going to have a solid line, so I don't have to worry about drawing the dashes. I'm just going to draw my solid line. Except this time, since it's greater than, I am shading above. Now you'll start to memorize these the more you do these, but it's not too important that you memorize it from the start. It'll come with time. So generally, once again, if it's ever less than or equal to, shade below. If it's ever greater than or equal to, shade above. If it's no bar, dashed line. If I do have the bar, solid line. So you'll see these patterns pop up. But this is my reference chart I'm going to be using so that I can graph these. So my general steps are the same as graphing y equals mx plus b linear equations. You just have to make sure, similar to before, that it is in y equals mx plus b form. So if it's in standard form, we have to change it into slope-intercept form. Once you have it in the form of y less than or y greater than, so on and so forth, once y is by itself, you plot the line. So you plot the points. Do not connect the points. Because you plot the points first, and then you connect the points either with a solid or dashed line. So you can see what I did at first. I just made a solid line, but this was a dashed. So then I had to go over it to make it look like dash. So it's always important to plot the points and then consider, okay, am I connecting them with a solid or with a dashed line? And then finally, you will either shade your graph above or below, depending on whether it's less than or greater than. So let's start with the first one. Now the first one, we'll ask ourselves, do I have to rearrange? Well, no. Y is already by itself. So no, you can either say y is by itself or it is already in y equals mx plus b form. Or you can write it's already in y less than or equal to mx plus b form. Generally what we're saying is the y is by itself, and then I have my slope and my y-intercept on the other side. It's ready to graph. Now, solid or dashed line. Well, to figure out whether I'm doing solid or dashed line, look at your inequality symbol. Now notice this one matches this one. So you can look at your reference chart. It tells me shade below, which makes sense. I'm less than. So for shade above below, shade below, because it is less than. And then solid or dashed line, well, if I look here, it tells me I'm doing a solid line. By the way, B dash C just means because it is equal to, or you can write it has the bar. So the reason we have a solid line this time is because it has a bar, or it is equal to. So both of these, once again, will be solid lines. And we're shading below because it's less than. So both of these will be shaded below. So let's start. My y-intercept is -1. So the first point I plot is at -1. So that's your y-intercept. my slope is 2, which is really 2 over 1. So my rise is 2, my run is 1. So I'm going to go up 2 over 1. So up 1, 2 over 1. Here's my next point. Up 2 over 1. Up 2 over 1. Going back to my y-intercept. Down 2 over 1. Down 2 over 1. This is my line. Now, be careful. We said we are solid line. So I can just connect my points. You can find any straight edge. Your IDs work very well for straight edges. And I connect my points with a solid line. And we said we are shade below because it was less than. So I'm going to be shading everywhere downwards from here. So that's how you graph the inequality. So that's just your first example. Hopefully you can notice that's not too difficult. It's exactly what you've been doing before. The only difference is that now we're shading and we're either having solid or dashed lines. For the next one, we ask ourselves, do we have to rearrange? Yes. Notice x and y are on the same side. It is not in y equals mx plus b form because y is not by itself. Or you can say something also along the lines of y is not by itself, or x and y are on the same side. Generally, we can tell, hey, this does not look like one of these, where y is by itself, which means I have to rearrange it. So it's right now in standard form, where x and y are on the same side. So let's try to rearrange. X minus 2y less than 6. I probably should have done it more here so I had more space. So we'll keep going. Remember, your first step is always to subtract x from both sides so you can get y by itself. That'll leave you with 2y, or negative 2y. Be careful, since that's minus 2, and I got rid of the x, it now becomes negative 2y. Less than, I like to write the x first just because it's mx plus b. So my negative x, this 6 is positive, plus 6. Now we're almost close, but remember, it has to be y equals mx plus b form. Y has to be by itself. Right now, y is not by itself. So you are going to divide by negative 2 on both sides. And remember, if there's two numbers on the right side, you divide both numbers by negative 2. And this is going to give you, so let me rewrite again so I have more space. Y, because the negative 2's cancel out, greater than, because remember, anytime you divide by a negative, your inequality symbol flips. So if you need to make a note for yourself somewhere, that you flip your inequality symbol if you divide by a negative. So don't forget that. That's a very important rule. So now instead of being y less than, it becomes y greater than because I divided by negative 2. Negative x divided by negative 2. First off, negative and negatives cancel out. So it's going to be positive. And I know x really is 1x. So negative x is really negative 1x. So I'm going to rewrite this as 1/2. Take the 1, take the 2, the negatives cancel out. Positive 1/2. X on the side. 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. So my equation I can graph, now notice this, looks like these forms, where y is by itself, you have an inequality symbol, and you have mx plus b. So I rearranged it. So be careful, you can't always go straight to graphing, sometimes you will have to rearrange it first. Now looking at my problem, this is my graph I want to, or the equation I want to graph. So once again, you start with your y-intercept, it's negative 3. So here's my negative 3. My slope is 1/2, so I'm going to go up 1 over 2. So up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. Go back to my y-intercept, down 1, left 2, down 1, left 2. And now I have my line. But be careful, we have to make sure we answer these questions. So solid or dashed line. I can either say, hey, it doesn't have a bar, so it's going to be a dashed line, or you could look up here and say, okay, which one matches this one? Well, it's my greater than symbol, and it tells me dashed line. So that's why the reference chart is really important. So dashed line, and then if you say why, because you can either say is strictly less than or has no bar. So it's not less than or equal to, it's just less than. Shade above or below, it's greater than, so I'm going to shade above. But if I had looked here in my reference chart, shade above. And then why, it is greater than. So remember, if you're greater than or equal to, you'll always shade above. If you're less than or equal to, you'll always shade below. Let's keep going. Now, to connect my lines, once again, don't do the same thing I did before. Do not just connect these with a solid line because dashed line. So when I connect my points, I'm going to connect them, leaving spaces so that it is obvious that it's a dashed line. So I can see a space here, kind of a space here, a space here. So notice this is what a dashed line looks like, this is what a solid line looks like. And then we said we are shading above. So I'm going to shade above my line. So everywhere above this section. So more or less something that looks like this. And then you're done graphing. And that is the notes for 3.4. So really important, make sure you know your steps. This is very, very important. Make sure you write down your graphs and as well as the descriptions, the names, what the forms look like. And then these are the questions you should always be asking yourself as you're solving these problems. Do I rearrange? Yes or no? Why or why not? Do I have solid or dashed line, shade above or below? Other than that, go on to your practice page for this section. If you have any questions, feel free to email your teacher or sign up for tutoring. Have a nice day.